Join Patti Conklin and Healing Within Radio each week. More than entertainment, Healing Within offers educational, useful tools for everyday life. Listen for help overcoming fear, anxiety, and depression. Patti knows about eliminating cancer, MS, dementia, Parkinson's, and a host of illnesses that we face every day. Life can be good. Life is good. All you need are simple tools to start changing your life. Start right now by visiting PattiConklin.com, PattiConklin. No matter where you are in the world, you can work with Patti through Skype, phone, or in person, visiting one of her retreats in Georgia. Visit PattiConklin.com today, or call our offices at 404-474-0086. That's PattiConklin.com, or call 404-474-0086.
Hi everyone, it's Patti Conklin and Healing Within. Thank you so much for joining me on today's show. I have a wonderful guest and I know you're going to enjoy her and her wisdom and all of her great thoughts. So I appreciate you joining us and spending time with us on this topic of fear. You know, we're looking at it in so many different directions, and Lynn Robinson has another way of looking at it. So we're going to say hi, Lynn.
Hi to you and everyone listening.
Thank you so much for being a part of the show today. I really appreciate you coming on. Tell us about you. I mean, I know you're you were a professor for a while, University of South Alabama, which down here in the South means a lot for the people listening down here. But talk to me a little bit about you, about life growing up and when you started really working with spirit, with coming out of your psychic closet, all of that. Let's start a little bit from the beginning. Give us a little bit of you.
Well, I've had occasion to think about that a lot, and it may actually go back to my imaginary playmate when I was preschool, but I'm not sure about that. I probably was not aware of how intuitive I am until maybe college, maybe graduate school, and certainly after that. However, I never had any problems in school, and I have to think that a lot of that may have had to do with intuition, that I could intuit responses on exams or ways to get problems solved and that sort of thing. I don't really know. I just know that it was all maybe easier than it should have been. I also know that I, for some reason, wasn't afraid to be a little bit different. I decided as a teenager that I wanted to be able to take care of myself even though I was female. And in those years, women did not have the careers they did now. You know, I'm an old, and I made the decision that I was going to get a degree in business, which meant I had to go to a public university. The private women's schools didn't have very good majors. You could get an economics or something, but it was kind of lightweight from what I understand. And the really outstanding business schools were all male.
Yeah.
I went to the University of Wisconsin, which was an outstanding public school, and that's where I started. Then I transferred to Emory University as a junior, as the first year that women were allowed in their business school in Atlanta.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I did my graduate work, I was one of two women doing doctoral work at the University of Alabama in the business school at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, one in accounting, and I was in marketing. So that, you know how all that happened? I don't know. I never looked at, I'm going to get this done so much as, what is it that I want to do? And
right. What's around the next corner? Yeah. So where were you born?
I was born in Mobile.
In Mobile. Yeah. So going back to Tuscaloosa was kind of coming back home.
Yeah. And my father and my grandfather had been to school there.
Beautiful. Yeah. So what did you want to do with this financing and marketing degree?
I wanted to, well, right, right out of undergraduate school with my degree from the business school at Emory, I went to Macy's in New York, where I worked as a young executive. One of the fun things I did there, because I knew the guy in charge of the Thanksgiving Day parade, I was actually a clown.
Wow.
Yeah, great time. Had a great time.
Yeah.
And then I decided I really would prefer to go into the teaching aspect of business rather than the executing business, though by the time I left the university, I had my own consulting business, consulting with all businesses of, from mom and pop shops to Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah.
Really more on people interaction than on the marketing aspects.
And of course, intuition's going to play into both. I mean, it sounds like you were a natural intuitive without really even recognizing that maybe you were a natural intuitive at that time.
By the time I was a professor, I knew that I was a natural intuitive. And one of the funny things that would happen when I would sometimes team with other consultants to do work for, a major company. And we would have something planned in working with that executive group, and it wasn't panning out. And we'd take a break, and they'd say, okay, we've got to make some quick changes. And they would look at me and say, okay, Lynn, do your thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Put space out and bring in a couple of ideas to make really quick changes, and we'd go with it.
Right. You said, I've got here that you wrote your first book, Coming Out of Your Psychic Closet, How to Unlock Your Naturally Intuitive Self. When did you write that?
I wrote that, I don't have a copyright at hand. I think it was 1998, maybe. I know it was in the 1990s.
Yeah. And what did you want to express in that?
I'm sorry?
What did you want to express in that, in the book itself?
I wanted people to be unafraid of their intuition. And so I was willing to actually say psychic closet as kind of a catchphrase to draw people in. What happened to me as a result of that, Patti, was just unbelievably wonderful things, because people with intense intellect who themselves were naturally intuitive and knew it brought me into some of their circles. And there was an organization formed called the Intuition Network. Yeah. And I ended up serving on the board of that network, and I made friends from all over.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. And so what was the next step then in teaching and just helping people understand their intuition?
Well, there were a number of things. I was able to bring some friends of mine who were shaman from South America. However, they were both shaman. The male, who is now deceased, and I think I have in my latest book, Loving to the End and On, how he came to say goodbye the night he died. But she was from Peru, he was from Brazil, and he was a consultant to the Smithsonian. I became friends with them and was able to bring them to Mobile, to the University of South Alabama, where I taught. But they spoke at grand rounds in the medical school, and then to the nursing faculty.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah. So while we're still in this segment, I want to go into this a little bit more, but at some point you became, after deaths of family and friends and so forth, you became a hospice volunteer, because I'd really like to talk on this show. We've been talking about emotional fear and physical fear and so on and so forth. But fear of death is something that I work with a lot of my clients on. But I wanted to ask you about becoming a hospice volunteer and so forth. What kind of moved you into that?
Well, certainly the fact that people no longer in their physical bodies talk to me, people I know and people I don't know, and the people I don't know sometimes tell me who they want to get in touch with. The The other thing was my father's demise. He died at age 98 and a half. There's a chapter about that in Loving to the End and On, with some caveats about hopefully that'll help people have good experiences in the end. So once he had died, and the hospice workers had been so incredibly helpful to us and so understanding, just absolutely marvelous. I cannot recommend hospice highly enough.
Right.
And so I thought, well, that makes sense to me to volunteer. And I volunteered only, though, for one aspect of that, which is just at the end of life, when there are no family members present, and so hospice likes to have someone there.
Right.
Having said that, though, I was frequently called to go to other places too, and did. I have not been active in hospice for the last couple of years because some other things in my life have intervened, but at some point I'll get back to that.
Yeah, I know my niece is in medical school right now, and her focus will be on end of life care. And I'm really proud of her, because that's a challenging medical field to go into, is the end of life care. And I think, some of it is just, I've always been so open with her about my work and so forth, that she decided that, with the deaths of her grandparents and so forth, that she would move into it. And it takes a special person to be able to be in hospice or be in the medical field for end of life care, because the fear is so overwhelming. So, when we come back from break, I'd really like to go into that a little bit more. Do you know when you're afraid? Fear versus challenge, tormentor or teacher. And I've got some thoughts about that, but I really want to hear your thoughts on that, and what really takes us to that place. Is it fear, or is it a new exploration going back onto the other side? So let's talk about that when we come back. But you've had a fascinating life. I can absolutely see that, and I can't wait to hear more about that and where we're going with that. So, folks, this is Patti Conklin and Healing Within, and you can reach Lynn at her website at let me see if I got it here. Or is that LBRUMIN at AOL.com. Hi, everyone. This is Patti Conklin with my guest, Lynn Robinson, PhD. Thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of Healing Within. I hope that you find it informative and educational, and help you understand your own intuition and how you face fear, and what you do to overcome that fear. So I really appreciate everyone being with us and following through with this. So Lynn, how do you know when you're afraid? Or do you know when you're afraid? How do people react?
In numerous different ways. I think some people have a feeling in their tummy. Some people have their throats constrict.
Uh-huh.
Some people simply worry a lot. Some people get really, really busy. It's sort of an avoidance thing.
Okay. And so when people become aware that they're in avoidance, or, tummy's constricting or whatever, what's important for them to do at that point in order to understand that possibly they're in fear or they're uncomfortable? What is journaling a good idea? What do you suggest?
Well, journaling is a good idea for those people who like to write things down. Not everybody likes to do that. So that's one really good way. Another good way is to take a deep breath and say what's going on, and just examine it internally inside of your head. And ask yourself questions. What's going on? Why does my tummy feel this way? What's this related to? Something that's recently happened? Something that is triggered from the past? So I think those kind of questions can be very, very helpful. And again, you can do it in your head or you can write it down. Either way, some people pick up a book and read it, and they don't realize that the book they've picked, for instance, will lead them into what will explain the feeling. But the very first thing is to recognize the feeling, to feel what you feel.
Right, right. And so I'm assuming that this crosses all genres. I mean, whether it's about a relationship, whether it's about work, whether it's about your health, and everything in between.
Everything in between, any and all of the above.
Okay. And so when you ask fear versus challenge, talk to me about that.
Well, a challenge for me, as I interpret it, is something that stretches you, something where you've not had the experience to say, oh, I can do that. Fear is when there's something that you know needs to be done and you are not at all convinced that you can do it. You're scared of it. You prevaricate. You do avoidance things rather than just meet it head on. Sometimes what you need to do is simply say, what is going on? What is it I think I need to do? And how do I recognize this and divide it into whatever pieces there may be? And one could be challenging, it's exciting. The other could be, I didn't do something like this really well before, so I'm not sure. And sometimes there's a voice in your head from your past, a teacher, a parent, a friend who says, you can't do that.
Right.
And instead of challenging it, you accepted it. And, now's a good time to say, wait a minute. I'm not who I was when that negative thought was put in my head. Let's re-examine that.
How many people do you think, though, really sit back and go that deep into themselves? I mean, is it a crisis that brings it up, that forces them into that kind of thought mode, or what?
I think that's very individual. Some people do have a tendency to self-examine more frequently because of education or because of the way they were raised or just some psychological characteristic. Others, however, who want to move ahead and who have found ways to do that, whether it's with formal education or ways to simply survive in this world, have created a pattern of, I need to get from A to B. How do I do that?
Yeah. And so if they recognize, in looking at a fear versus a challenge, a fear is something that is reactive, a challenge is something that's external, moving forward, in my mind. So when would they move fear into a challenge? And if they're in a challenging situation, when would they recognize that they're in fear?
Well, first of all, I think sometimes you don't want to move from fear into challenge because there's a good reason to be afraid. Well, let me modify that. If you hear a rattlesnake and you're on a hike, it's good to be afraid.
Right.
And to take stock of that fear. And then the challenge is how to remove yourself from the challenge of and the fear of the rattlesnake. And there are such instances of that in life. Certainly in certain parts of the world where there is a lot of war and strife right now, there's good reason for fear.
Yeah.
And for not losing the fear, because the fear keeps you alert to your safety.
Right. Which is so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But when fear becomes so overwhelming that it stifles us and we just stop. How do you suggest people move out of it?
Again, first you recognize it, that I am so afraid, I am immobilized. I think then it's very good to go inside and find the places where you have not been afraid. the place where someone else has coached you or loved you into a little sense of safety, or a time when you were really, really threatened and you found your own way. And if you can get back to a place where you have succeeded, then you can use the strength of that success to move out of the fear.
Yeah.
Sometimes, it just takes a lot of self-talk that where you, I don't know if you ever read the book when you were a child about the little engine that could.
Yep.
When I, had to get up over the mountain with the toys to get them to the kids at Christmas on time, and he really wasn't strong enough, and so on the way up the mountain he kept saying, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And he got to the top, and he got over the top, and he said, ooh, I thought I could, I thought I could, I thought I could.
Right.
So sometimes you just need to reach for the strength to do that.
To just move yourself beyond the fear of it. Yeah. So
we need to make the caveat, Patti, that some people do have a physical impairment that makes that very, very difficult, and we need not to judge them because they can't.
Right.
We need to love them into a sense of security if we're able.
Yeah. What if we're looking at someone who has a fatal disease or a diagnosed fatal disease, and they're moving into that fear state? I know that, when I start working with someone, the first thing I tell them to do is surrender into the disease. And they're like, what? You want me to give up? And I'm like, no, I want you to understand this is what is in this place and time. And the more you surrender to it, the more that your body can free flow and begin to heal. But if you stay in fear, it shuts your body down, and you have less ability to heal. And so, I think it's important for people to surrender into what is in the moment and do everything they possibly can that feels right in order to get beyond a crisis, or move into what could be inevitable for them, of them crossing. Want to talk to you about that next segment. But when people are diagnosed with something, whether it's emotional or physical, and they move into that fear space, sometimes it's really challenging. They're like, well, of course I'm afraid. Well, yes, of course you are. However, that doesn't need to be the space that you stay into. You can now look at it as something that you can take on as an adventure to get beyond, not necessarily a challenge in my mind, but an adventure to move forward, to get to the other side and be through it. So what do you recommend to people in how they do that?
I had this vision come into my head as you were giving that example of a preteen whose parent told them that they had to take ballroom dancing lessons.
Yeah.
And so they, went with great fear and trepidation. First of all, they were going to have to dance with somebody of the opposite sex. Mm-hmm. And second of all, they had to follow somebody else's directions, and they weren't sure that they could follow the beat of the music, much less the directions. But they just had to get in there and do it. And then at the end of it all, they found out that it was great fun, and it opened up some other possibilities for them. Mm-hmm. I think if we can get people to grab onto metaphors like that one,
right,
that will help them find something that they can look at in their own heads. I mean, if somebody's diagnosed as dying and there is no escape, sometimes they get well, sometimes there's a miracle, but oftentimes if
they're going to transition.
Yeah. It. I mean, you just are. I'm at an age where a number of my friends have, and I've, been at the bedside with them. And so seeing those happy things in your head and envisioning what you're doing, and sure, it's scary, but I've done scary stuff before.
Right. Well, when we get back, let's talk about that, because I have a little bit of a theory I'd like to share, and see what you think about it. Hello, everyone. Thank you for continuing to be a part of our show today. This is Patti Conklin and Healing Within, and my guest today is Lynn B Robinson, a PhD, and we're talking about fear and different forms of fear and how to overcome it. Lynn has an amazing story. You can find more about her at her website, which is brumin@aol.com, or I guess website. That's her email. The website would be lynnrobinson.com and lynnbrobinson.com. So go visit her website and learn some more about Lynn and today's show. You know, Lynn, one of the things that I'm always amazed with is when people get ready to transition. And, you know, being a part of hospice, I'm sure you've seen this as well. And a good friend of mine put it in a beautiful way. When I was with one of my dear friends who was crossing, in the moment that his soul left, I was looking into his eyes and I saw tremendous fear. And I thought, wow, what are you being fearful of? I mean, we knew this was coming and so on and so forth. And I was holding his hand but his eyes, his soul had left his body, but his eyes were fearful. And a good friend of mine said, you know, when we're born, most of us come into this world crying. And I suspect if we've been on the other side, whether we've been in heaven or floating in spirit or whatever, and we're coming into a new surrounding, you know, all of a sudden we're coming through a vaginal canal and there's people talking and there's bright lights and there's whatever, it would be scary. And what would, you know, until we get used to it. And he said, how about if your friend actually, the soul left the body and he went back to spirit and went, holy crap, I forgot all of this. Where am I? And so the human eyes showed fear when the soul was getting reoriented to where it came from. And that gave me a lot of peace. It just made so much sense to me that you could have that moment of physical fear as your body is leaving, as your soul is leaving the body. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's a real possibility, and I like the way it was expressed. Having said that, I also know that there are people who don't have that, who smile and look off into space at something that pleases them. And I think there's everything in between. In talking to one of my friends who had an NDE, he had a very bad experience as he was dying, and for the first few minutes afterwards, until he asked for help from his expression of deity, and then everything opened up and was beautiful. Your explanation, I think, is great for those for whom it works, but I think we all find our own way.
Right. Well, I think that people cross with the deep belief of what they believe, you know, that what's going to be waiting for them is what they truly believe, not the last minute fear, but what they truly believe deep down is what's waiting for them. So it can be so many different things. So you asked the question, do you know where you learned fear? Is it from childhood? Is it from a past life? How do you learn it?
Well, in my own experience, it's from all kinds of different ways. Some of it, I think, is intuitive. Some of it may be from a past life. Some of it may be from a story that was read to you when you were a child, or today's world, something you've seen on TV or in the movie. You can learn fear from a friend, from an older sibling, from innumerable ways. And what I hope everybody who's listening will put some attention on is not how you learn fear, but how you learn to overcome fear.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what are some good steps to overcome fear?
To learn to trust yourself, to pay attention to what happens when you are afraid that gets you out of fear, just like you were mentioning, being aware of what did make you afraid, to learn and listen about how other people have gotten out of bad scrapes, whether it's movies or books, but I think in today's world, you really need to examine some of the ways that you see people getting out of bad scrapes, because they're sometimes more of the imaginal realm than realism. So
right.
You have to just learn to examine that. And don't be afraid to talk about fear with your friends or your family or a teacher, to say, this really bothers me. I'm not sure I'm fully afraid. Or you might say, I'm scared witless. What am I going to do?
Right.
So consult with others.
Yeah, I think that, some of the challenges that people get into in talking about fear, and their specific fears, is that they're going to be judged, whether it's family or friends or whoever. And so they kind of just stick it down inside of them. And, especially this time of year, we see more depression and so forth as things are happening around us, and we're moving into different states of holidays and so on. And I think that fear can cause someone to go into a depression, and the fear of judgment, of not being able to vocalize and be open to someone, is a real challenge for people, and they just kind of hibernate and introvert and have a hard time coming out of that. So, for the people that are challenged that way, who are having a hard time speaking up and finding their voice, what do you suggest to them to get them beyond that fearful state of being judged or challenged with how they feel?
One is to be willing to figure out where the fear came from. Mm-hmm. Did someone actually tell me I should be afraid of this? Have I been taught this fear? And is that really a problem of the person who taught it, or is it my problem?
Right.
So I think that's really important. Another thing is to take the fear apart into pieces. Yeah. And examine the pieces of what paints that picture of fear for you.
Right.
I think that can be very helpful. And another thing is to say, and I don't mean avoidance behavior here, but to just ask yourself, why am I spending the time on fear?
Yeah.
Is there something else I can be doing that would put me in a positive frame of mind, and then I can move ahead?
Yeah. 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 So, just from my work with so many people, it's so hard for them to recognize what could possibly have created fear, because maybe it happened so young in life that they don't have any memory of it. Or maybe it's a learned behavior from a family member, from a parent or a grandparent and so forth. I just find that people, for the most part, really don't understand they're in fear. And it takes that talk therapy to help them understand that they are in fear, and there's nothing to be fearful of, if they can explore it with their mind and use talk therapy or hypnosis or whatever it is they want to, what other modality they want to use it for. But I think that, having a safe place to respond, to unload, to overcome, to fear, interior, exterior, is critical. So talk to me just for a minute or two about that. Do people have safe places?
Not everyone, unfortunately. So then you have to find one. And when I say not everyone, I'm very well aware that I have lived in mostly safe spaces all my life, but there are people who live in very dangerous neighborhoods, where keep doors locked and have bars and windows on the doors, and even to venture outside can be a little threatening. So that's real.
Yeah.
And those real fears need close attention so that you have solutions to get around what may be physical threats and emotional threats. So I don't think you ever want to throw away the reality of certain fears. On the other hand, confront them and find solutions.
Right.
Can move somewhere else in the example that I just gave.
Right.
You are around friends who are constantly negative and telling you, oh, don't do that. That's you could get in trouble for that, or don't do that because it's against certain principles that we've been taught. Find another friend who helps you, who helps you grow away from that and into possibility and into beauty and into.
Okay. Let's continue that when we come back on the other side, because I want to talk to you about women in, shelters that have been abused and so forth, how they move beyond that. So folks, you're listening to Patti Conklin and Healing Within. My guest today is Lynn B Robinson, PhD, and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being a part of today's show. This is Patti Conklin and Healing Within, and we are with our guest, Lynn B Robinson, PhD, and we're talking about fear and different aspects of fear and how to kind of recognize when you're in it, what to do. You can find Lynn at her website, which is lynnbrobinson.com. and find out more information about her, because I know you're going to want to find out more information about her. So, Lynn, for people who have grown up in, somewhat safe surroundings, it's hard to imagine not being in safe surroundings. And I kind of grew up in not safe surroundings. I was 32 before I ever slept more than an hour in an evening, in a nighttime. And so, when you recognize fear and what it's doing to you, you can think it through and move through, which is what I chose to do. But I think about, individuals who are in homeless shelters or individuals who are in, safety abuse centers, women, men, because I believe in men get abused as well by females. So when people are in the thick of a fearful situation, fearful of their life, fearful for their children, living in a not safe situation, how do we, by them listening to this show, how do we encourage them to have the strength to move beyond that gut reaction or the response of, it's really my fault. And, and so they stay in that fear space. How do we help them understand that they can move beyond it?
Well, as you were going through that, the first thing that came to my mind was congratulations, because you mentioned these are people who've already gotten themselves to a shelter.
Yes.
Pat yourself on the back continuously for getting yourself out of a negative situation and into one of hope. It's not the last stop for you, but you've come to the beginning line of a better life. And that's huge. So continuously remind yourself of that. If someone's listening who has not yet gotten there, think about the people who have and use them as a beacon to get yourself there. Somebody else has done it. I can do it too.
Yeah.
I mean, my heart just expands hugely to think about the people who are in shelters and that they've gotten there. But it is important to realize that's not the last step. Learn from the people who are there to help you, and from the other people who've gotten themselves there.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
And then there are a lot of organizations out there who will help, and the people running the shelter can put you in touch with those, whether it has to do with education or health or a place to live, whatever you need. You've gotten yourself to a place where the next step is more help.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really that first step. That first step is the hardest for so many people to be willing to acknowledge that they can no longer handle it themselves, and that they need support and they need help. And they need loving, supportive people around them who understand their dynamics and the situation that they're in.
Something like that happened when I was still doing my professor work. And I had a just lovely young co-ed come to my office saying she was sorry she had missed class the day before. I noticed she had a cast on her arm. And she said her boyfriend had beaten her up and she'd gone somewhere to get medical help. And with her in the office, we made some calls within the university and other places to get her into a shelter. Mm-hmm. So if you don't know how to get into a shelter, go anywhere you can, police station, a church, almost anywhere, and say, can you help me find out how to get in touch with people who will get me to a shelter?
Right. Right. How do I get there? Take that first step. And even your physician, if you have a physician, can start getting some public service and getting in there and helping. I think it's important for people to recognize that, the psychological fear that so many experience. I have been well said at every show on this, or every time on this show. But fear to me is forgetting every available resource, and that's the strength you have inside of you. It's knowing that you can do whatever you need to do. If you can protect your children and you can protect other people that you don't know and so forth, recognize that you can protect yourself. So what do you do with fear? When we look at identify when you cower, you do nothing, for what reasons, or identify when you take action to understand or overcome to grow, for what reasons. What would make people continue to cower and do nothing? What is the fear so paralyzing that they can't do anything different?
I suppose with some people it can be. And to be frank, they're better problem solvers than others. So it may not be fear so much as a true inability to know where. And that's a place where, again, go to someone and ask and get that person to get you to the next step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so what do you recommend for people that are listening that are just stuck? They're just stuck. And even though they're listening to that going, yeah, I can do that, but intuitively they're pulling back. What can you say to help them get beyond that moment?
You are unique. You are special. You have the capacity to move ahead. You can go to your library and check out the little engine that could, and imagine yourself as being that little train, and I think I can. But you have to be willing to take a step.
Yeah.
And you can move one step at a time.
Those baby steps. They're important. Yeah.
Baby steps. If you can't get beyond your front door today, then say, tomorrow I'm going to get out of that front door. If you don't get beyond the street the second day, then tell yourself that night, I'm going to go farther tomorrow, and do the baby steps.
Yeah. Yeah. Just take it within your comfort zone.
And find somebody, if you can, who will reinforce that for you.
Yeah. Yeah. What is the title of your latest book?
The title of my latest book is Loving to the End and On, A Guide to the Impossibly Possible.
And tell me just a little bit about that.
Well, the book was written to help people understand that life takes on a lot more aspects than one might think. I do include a lot of things about life beyond the physical body or outside of the physical body, but I don't demand that readers believe that. Mm-hmm. It's an opportunity to look at the fact that life is going to end and all of the beautiful things that can happen as a result of that. There are a lot of resources in the book, including some movies that you can watch and check out and watch or order online or however you do that. It's an opportunity to examine the fullness of life that one can see retrospectively from the end.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big believer that good always comes out of bad. And so, sometimes it's reflecting back on your life, even to the bad things that have happened, and understand how you grew from that experience and what you learned. And it's important to stay focused on that and not the negative. And, as we all get to that place of transitioning, it's understanding that life is not promised, and that there's times that, people become incredibly fearful, phobic even, about that aspect. But I think that it's important to understand that every day we have is an amazing blessing, and that we can take it as such. That fear is only that. In metaphysics, they talk about, what false evidence appearing real. And a lot of times what you fear the most is not as big in the window as what you think it is. It's overcoming it by baby steps. So in our last few minutes here, what would you suggest for people that are in fear, willing to take those baby steps? What would you recommend to them?
One of the things that I say for this purpose and many other purposes is to keep in mind that you are more than a physical body. Mm-hmm. And if that's difficult, suspend your disbelief for just a moment to consider, I am more than a physical body. So that gives you a lot of options. And it gives you a lot of ways to proceed in life.
Right. Beautiful words. Beautiful words. Folks, you've been listening to Lynn B Robinson. You can find her website at lynnbrobinson.com. This is Patti Conklin and Healing Within. And so thankful that you stayed with us today and listened to the show. I think you've learned a lot, and I deeply appreciate every single one of you. Let's overcome our fear and move forward. Lynn, thank you so much for being a guest on Healing Within. I truly appreciate it, and hope we get to talk again sometime.
Thank you. It was my joy to be with you.
Thank you.
Patti Conklin grew up in Brooktondale, New York with a unique ability. Unlike others, she could see how the vibration of words and emotions affected the physical body. She discovered how to release stored emotion and facilitate healing. This began today's Conklin method of cellular cleansing. The private practice grew with tremendous results, as did her reputation. More and more people sought her out, bringing her into the home for healing. She soon realized she could even teach this to others, and they could shift perception and thus prevent illness from occurring. Patti Conklin quickly became a frequent keynote speaker, and she developed a curriculum for teaching the Conklin method of cellular cleansing. For more information, visit PattiConklin.com, PattiConklin, PattiConklin.com, or call 404-474-0086. That's 404-474-0086.